the typical factory in America only operates for about 2,000 hours per year. So what that means is the typical factory in America is sitting idle and collecting dust 75% of the time. What we've seen financially for these factories is that once they put in robots, they're actually able to increase the utilization of their plant. We use an augmented reality set of tools to validate all of the positioning information. Our software will design a robot, and then in a simulation environment, what's called digital twin often, we do a validation test to make sure that the robot works in the ways that we need to. And then the final step before we actually deploy is we use augmented reality to place the full system in the customer's facility and allow them to view it in an interactive and three-dimensional way.
Hi everyone, welcome to the All Things XR podcast. In today's episode, I have the pleasure to have Saman Farid, CEO and founder of Formic, where they are revolutionizing manufacturing with autonomous robots. Hi Saman.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks very much. So Saman, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your company Formic?
Sure. My company Formic, we deploy robots into factories. We currently have about 100 something factories in the US that we have helped with automation. A lot of factories that we work with make products that we use in our daily lives, everything from metal parts for automotive and aerospace and defense to plastic parts for lawnmowers and golf carts, medical devices, and all the way down to consumer packaged goods that are used in our daily lives. Toilet paper and chocolate chip cookies and cardboard boxes and uh, laundry detergent. These are all products that are necessary in our daily lives, and the factories that make these products have been struggling with lack of labor availability for many, many years. And so Formic exists to help them fill that labor gap and improve the quality of life of the workers and improve the overall competitiveness of those factories. We live in a world today where tariffs and all of these different things are threatening the way that supply chains have worked. And so the importance of manufacturing has gone up. And especially it's more and more important than ever for factories to build up more resilience. And so that's what we do as a company. Um, just a little bit about my own background. I started this company about 5 years ago. Prior to that, I was a venture capitalist for about 15 years, investing in AI, machine learning, robotics. Particularly got really excited when deep learning started to become more and more capable of doing things like image recognition and voice recognition. And I realized this was going to change the way that we live our lives in every sector and every industry. And so I started an incubator and a venture fund where I was investing in those kinds of companies. And then prior to that, I built and sold two software companies. And Yeah, that's the really short background of my journey into this.
Awesome, awesome. So Saman, what inspired you to transition from venture capital to leading a robotic focused company?
Yeah, I grew up in and around factories. My parents moved to China when I was very young, and my dad worked in the manufacturing sector, so he used to take me into factory tours all the time, and I got to see how things were made, and that always captivated me. And then fast forwarding into the future, as I worked on more and more investing in robotics companies, I got to see how robotics companies went through this journey of building incredible technology, and then second, after they built the technology, they had to figure out how to build the go to market and how to drive adoption in the real world. And so many of them struggled with that second part that I realized there's a massive opportunity in just focusing on that second piece, right? So how can we really focus our business on driving adoption and starting from the customer needs? And so combining what I saw in the manufacturing world with what I saw in the world of robotics, I realized that this gap needed to be solved somehow.
Uh-huh. Was there a specific point where you said, yeah, that's the future, I have to go into robotics?
I don't think there was one specific point. It's just more and more voices kind of coming together and making it more clear. Um, I think as an engineer by training, I always had a fascination with robotics. It's always fun to see when you write code and it's just in software. It's satisfying, but when you write code and something physical moves, it's much more satisfying somehow. And so I always kind of had this fascination with how can we use these technologies for physical things in the real world where we live, and more importantly than that, how can we use this in the industries that need it the most? So if you look at global GDP, we've so far applied a lot of technology to kind of information, to kind of the internet, to ad optimization and customer acquisition, but very little of that technology has been applied to the vast majority of GDP, which is things like agriculture, things like mining, things like construction, things like manufacturing. That's really where the vast majority of
Hmm.
the global population works. And that's really where the vast majority of the global population benefits from the most. And we haven't really seen a lot of penetration of technology into the rest of that part of the world. So that's what I'm personally most excited about.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, totally agree. So, someone you started Formic before the recent AI hype and before ChatGPT, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So, how the recent AI boom have affected robotics and specifically your company?
Yeah, so I think for those of us who have been in the AI industry for some time, this boom wasn't really a surprise. I think we were
Hmm.
all expecting it to happen. It was just wasn't clear when, and it wasn't clear which product would really get all of the user growth. Really, ChatGPT, the main thing that it did was it drove lots and lots of user growth into a sector, or into a new product category. But AI has been continuously getting better since, let's say, 2008.
Hmm.
Starting with things like computer vision and text recognition and speech recognition. I think if you extrapolate that path, it was clear that AI was going to be critical to the way that computers understand the world. Um, you know, that applies both to understanding text, which is what these LLMs have been very, very good at, and similarly, the same technology is being used to understand the physical world through sensors, right? Whether it's camera sensors or other types of sensing, we're understanding the world so that the computer can then make decisions about what to do with what it observes in the world. And I think um, for us, it's not really been particularly surprised.
Hmm. Awesome. And someone, when we talk about robots right now, most people imagine humanoids. Formic's approach to robots is a bit different. Can you tell us a bit how the Formic robots work and tell us about the specific scenario?
Yeah, so we have robots that do a variety of different kinds of tasks. The most challenging part in deploying a robot generally is understanding what the task is that the robot needs to do,
Hmm.
because that determines all the mechanical constraints too. So if you're picking up a small object versus a large object, just as an example, you need a very different kind of robot. If you're doing it slowly, one box per minute versus very, very quickly, 100 boxes a minute, you need a very different kind of hardware. And so the first piece of software that we built was the task evaluation tooling. So it allows our team to do a LiDAR scan of the customer's facility and then really, really quickly generate a bunch of information about what exactly does the task need to accomplish, and then to use AI to generate the right hardware selection for that task. That might include choosing different kinds of robot components. That might include different sensors. That might include conveyors and fixturing and all the different things that are surrounding it. Then the second piece of software that we built is software that runs on the robot itself to help the robot operate. And so that includes the perception stack, the vision stack, and the robot operating system to help it in the decision making process. And that's something that we're continuously innovating and adding new tasks to all the time. And then the third piece, the last piece, is the ongoing service and maintenance and operational needs of deploying and managing a robot. So once it's in the field, teleoperation, smart error handling, preventative and predictive maintenance. All of these are things that, and kind of fleet level operations and management are all things that are really important to being able to have a robot that performs with 99.9%
Hmm.
uptime. And so really, we built all of those things, which are very, very commercial in nature, which is how do we get the robot deployed effectively, operating effectively, and to keep it running for years and years and years, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Um, uh, that set of infrastructure is really the software tooling that we built at Formic. And then in addition to that, of course, all the kind of go to market and asset financing and things that are necessary to make the business model.
Awesome. And your robots are designed specifically to work in a certain condition and environment. So it is factory specific, and you have to go to factories, design a robot process and workflow for them, or it is something generic and would work in any factory.
Yeah, it's something in between. So
Uh-huh.
we have designed a preset set of modules that are pre-designed and productized. And then depending on the task that we are doing, we mix and match those modules to be able to do that job. And so we can deploy these robots very, very quickly by having these preset and pre-built modules that are easy to deploy.
Awesome. And diving a bit on the technical side, can you describe a bit about the training process of Formic robotics?
Yeah, so when we deploy these for training the robots, or do you mean training the team that works with the robots?
No, no, training the actual robot.
Training the robot to do the task, it depends a lot on what the task is. For some tasks, it's actually kind of rule-based systems. So it's a preset sequence of activities. The robot perception is just observing like the position of the product or the orientation of the infeed or the kind of current status of the outfeed section of the robot, or whatever that might be. But the robot is actually just doing a task that's relatively repetitive. There are, in some instances, the robot is doing much more adaptive work. Um, and in those situations, some amount of training is required. That's generally through kind of multiple observations of that task. And typically we have our engineers who support to make that happen. But we are typically deploying robots within half a day. So if the robot arrives in the morning, by lunchtime, usually the robot is running.
Awesome, that's great. So, someone you mentioned scanning the factories with LiDAR. Do you use any digital twins or technologies like AR and VR in parts of the process from training to deploying Formic robots?
We do actually. So we use an augmented reality set of tools to validate all of the positioning information. So when we have, our software will design a robot, and then in a simulation environment, what's called digital twin often, we do a validation test to make sure that the robot works in the ways that we need to. And then the final step before we actually deploy is we use augmented reality to place the full system in the customer's facility and allow them to view it in a interactive and three-dimensional way. This is really, really important for a successful robot deployment because um, the factory's operations often need to change depending on what that robot is doing and how it's working. For example, they might need to change the way that their conveyor is laid out, or they might need to change the place where the forklift comes through, the robot, or they might need to change the way that the people walk between different parts of the facility. All of those operational questions need to be resolved before you deploy the robot if you plan to be successful. And so that's what we found augmented reality to be very, very helpful with.
Awesome. And there are any success stories that comes to mind and about the factories and companies you work with?
Um, so I think we have a lot of success stories to talk about. A lot of our customers, um, the vast majority of factories that we work with are small and medium-sized factories.
Hmm.
They're not the biggest companies in the world. They're generally the small suppliers that make components for those big guys. These factories have had a hard time historically with automating. It's been very difficult for them to learn about robotics. It's been very difficult for them to have the engineering capabilities to successfully deploy robotics in the past. And we've been very focused on making it so easy for them that they can quickly say yes. And so
Hmm.
by making it easy enough, a lot of these factories have started to grow their production. 70% of the factories that we work with have never had robots before Formic. And once they have robots with us, we've seen very high continued growth. Typically, each of these factories will start with one or two robots and then quickly expand to 10 or 20 robots. And the last thing is that a lot of these customers are very, very short-staffed. So the typical factory in America has about 30% unfilled headcount today. So because there's such a shortage of labor available for these factories, without significantly more robots, they're not able to meet the production demand. And so when we put robots, these factories are able to increase their production and throughput. The workers end up happier because they're doing less of the painful, repetitive work. The wages of the workers go up, and the whole factory ultimately is more successful. So I think we have a lot of examples of that to point to.
Uh-huh. Awesome. And how have Formic robots helped these factories economically over the long term?
Generally, these factories, so the typical factory in America only operates for about 2,000 hours per year,
Hmm.
which is about one quarter of the available hours in the year. So what that means is the typical factory in America is sitting idle and collecting dust 75% of the time. What we've seen financially for these factories is that once they put in robots, they're actually able to increase the utilization of their plant. They're able to run longer hours, sometimes 15 hours a day, 20 hours a day, in some cases 24 hours a day. And so when they're able to increase utilization, they can triple or even quadruple their total production as a factory, which is a huge impact. And more importantly, if they quadruple their top line, really they're almost 8x or 10xing their bottom line because the vast majority of the costs of these factories are fixed costs that have already been covered. So when they increase production, the marginal cost doesn't go up too much, and the marginal revenue goes up very significantly. So we've seen many factories that were maybe barely profitable or not profitable become significantly profitable once they've deployed enough automation.
Awesome. And someone, when we talk about robots and automation, the first country that comes to mind is China. How do you see robots and companies like Formic help other countries to catch up with China?
Yeah. So I lived in China for many years. I helped build a few manufacturing facilities when I lived there as well. And I think you're right that China has a lot of significant advantages in its ability to deploy and manage automation. Last year alone, there were 450,000 robots deployed in China, and there were only about 30,000 deployed in the US. So I think there's a lot of catching up to do. Um, that happens in two sides. One is other countries need to get better at deploying and building and managing robots. And the second part is that we also need to build more infrastructure to support companies that deploy robots. So there's significant lack of engineering capacity, for example, in the US. The cost of engineering is very expensive. The cost of components is very expensive. And a lot of the components that end up in the robot supply chain are also coming from China. So I think for other countries to figure out ways to automate, there's a long journey ahead to rebuild some of that infrastructure. Some of the countries that are leading the charge today are places like Germany and Japan that have a very strong industrial footprint and a history of successfully deploying robots or building robots.
Awesome. And besides China and US, do you see any other country that is notable in working on robotics manufacturing?
Yeah, I think Germany and Japan really are the two best examples that come to mind. They have a long history of successfully deploying robots and building robots as well. Some of the best and biggest robot companies in the world are ABB and Fanuc and Yaskawa. ABB, KUKA, which is originally a German company, but now is owned by a Chinese company. So really, there's a very wide range.
And someone, when we talk about robots and especially in labor, the thing that comes to mind is robots replacing humans. And how do you see this debate? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's very overblown. I think that for sure that there are many, many tasks that robots will do better than humans, but I think there's still many things that humans are very important for. And if we look at past revolutions like this, where, for example, the printing press or even kind of steam engines, or if you look at different kinds of machinery, for example, you look at farming equipment. All of these, of course, reduce the amount of labor needed, but more important than that, they increase the productivity significantly and also increase the amount of work that humans could do in other sectors. So generally, I'm not too worried about robots taking jobs. And I think there's the other evidence for that is, like I mentioned earlier, these factories are very short-staffed, right? So the
Hmm.
typical factory in America has so much unfilled headcount and if you tell them, hey, tomorrow I have 200 extra employees for you, all these factories would be celebrating, not suffering.
Awesome. And how's the investment landscape for AI and robotics have evolved since you started in the field?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in it. We get calls almost every day from investors who want to invest in AI and robotics. Unfortunately, the reality is very few of them actually understand robotics and manufacturing and AI in a meaningful way. So I think there's a steep learning curve, and I think every entrepreneur knows that the investor that you bring on is like an employee that you can never fire. And so uh, the it's really important, I think, for people to choose investors that understand the use case and understand the need and understand the challenges of building a company uh, like this.
Awesome. And what are the trends you see in robotics and AI that excites you the most?
I think robots are getting smarter and smarter every day. AI is becoming more capable. In robotics specifically, one of the things I'm most excited about is what's called vision language action models, which are a new set of models that combine computers' ability to perceive the physical world, interact with language and instructions, and be able to create actions in the physical world. That's a new area of research, and it's still quite early in terms of its commercial application. But I think it's showing a lot of promise.
Awesome. And where do you see the robotics industry heading in the next, for example, 5 years, especially in manufacturing?
Um, I think it's growing very, very quickly. We'll see hopefully tens of thousands, if not millions, of robots deployed over the next few years. And I think it's a really, really important time for every company to be thinking about their robotic strategy because um, every company that works in the physical world will have some kind of robotics impact.
Awesome. And for example, a CEO of a company active in manufacturing, what mindset should someone have about robotics and in the future of labor?
I think it's important for people to be willing to take some risks and try new things. There's a lot of complexity and it's difficult for people to adopt robotics, but we feel like, like any sector, I think if you become stagnant, then you are probably going to die. And so, one of the things that we've been helping a lot of these factories with is really getting over the initial cultural challenges of deploying robots. The fear factor of something new and unknown is generally the biggest bottleneck to growth for a lot of these businesses.
hmm And what advice would you give to AI and robotics startups starting today?
I think the most important thing is to really focus on a clear customer need. I think a lot of AI and robotic companies like working on cool technology, but
Mhm.
sometimes they forget that somebody has to pay for it. And one of the things that is really important is to make sure that these companies are addressing a real world use case from as early as possible.
Awesome. And as of our last question, someone, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs looking to start a company today? What are the challenges about being a CEO and the mindset and the challenges they might face today? What advice would you give them?
I think the best advice that I've heard, which I'm stealing it from somewhere else, I forget where I heard it, but somebody once said that action creates learning. And
Mhm.
so I think that there's a lot of people who sit around and plan and theorize and think for a long, long time. But the real way to learn the answers of what you want to do is through action. And that's something that I'm uh, very much excited about. Is I think we need entrepreneurs to just take action and learn things in the process. And it, you know, there's a lot of traditional advice around being more cautious than that, but I think uh, it's dangerous to be too cautious too.
Awesome, awesome. Well, someone, it was great having you on the All Things XR podcast. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.